The Curate's Egg, Ashraf Ali Thanvi, Part 3, Suicidal Tendencies. Let's have a listen to one of their great modern day leaders.
I could not help myself accepting this invitation because Hakimul Ummah Hazrat Maulana Ashraf Ali Thanvi Rahmatullah Alayh has always been my ideal since my very childhood, and the more I read about him, the more I studied his books, his works, my love for this great person has been increasing.
Here it's quite clear and quite apparent just how well regarded Ashraf Ali Thanvi is amongst modern day Deobandis. And the section from which I took that clip, it has a number of interesting features and points, and in other parts of this series I will actually touch upon them. I'll touch upon one of them today specifically, but before I do, what I want to talk about today is the suicide incident in Ashraf Ali Thanvi's life. If you go back to the timeline, you'll find that this occurs in the year 1898, which corresponds to the Islamic calendar of 1316, the year of anxiety. Now, this incident, this statement, happens and is recorded by one of the most authoritative biographies available on Ashraf Ali Thanvi. And here I bring you the screenshot. It was composed by an author, a poet, someone who was a real pensmith, and it was two authors, so two people commented upon it, two people came together to bring this authoritative biography called Ashraf as-Sawani', which is the 3 volumes of Ashraf Ali Thanvi's life. And it was published after the Sufi master's death in 1943. In form and content, Ashraf as-Sawani' resembled Sufi tazkiras, a genre of writing that deployed the master's recorded conversations, malfuzat, anecdotal memories, frequent citations from Arabic, Persian, mystical poetry to reconstruct the master's lived reality. So the sources here, like I've mentioned previously, they're not anti-Ashraf Ali Thanvi sources. They are authoritative canon. And this is where I take this anecdote from. And another thing to mention is it happens after he has direct contact with his Sufi Sheikh Imdadullah, Haji Imdadullah. Him and his father become disciples of his. He has intense spiritual and meditative practices. He undertakes pilgrimages for 6 months. He settles permanently in Thana Bhavan. Then this suicide incident comes up. So it should be quite problematic and troubling how a leader, a scholar, someone that other people look up to, would document this incident in his life. It's very disturbing. It states, he was anxious to the extent that even suicide crossed his mind. As he himself reported, once a friend came to visit me during these turbulent days. He was carrying a loaded rifle. I fancied telling him to terminate my disgraced existence by means of his rifle. And then the Professor Mian states, this statement reflected a nihilistic embrace of physical death and a sense of unpleasure, which often followed anxiety according to Freud. While Ghawri, the Persian Urdu poet who was one of the co-authors of this biography, while Ghawri himself used the word suicide to characterize these thoughts, a more appropriate, and there's a spelling mistake here, but a more appropriate word would have been despondency. But let's get things straight here. This is suicide. Now, for those of you who would be interested to learn more about terrorism and suicide, the Gletkin Rubashov channel has another series, and it's called Tablighi Jamaat, A House Divided. But there's a 20-part series there, and part 10 goes through an extensive breakdown of exactly what terrorism is, in terms of definition, case studies, different types of terrorism. But the people who have their primary ideologue recorded in official authoritative biographies discussing his desire for suicide should really think twice before they accuse other people of having suicidal tendencies. The leader of this group has had suicidal tendencies. What does that do to a young, fragile mind to see someone experiencing this sort of state, especially after all of his initiation with his Sufi master has been completed, especially since all his meditative and religious practices have been completed, especially since the pilgrimages have been finished? You should be at a state of tranquility. Where do we find Ashraf Ali Thanvi? At a state of suicide. This is very disturbing. Now, another thing that I'd like to mention is the issue of isolationism, and this I'll bring from a thesis that was submitted to the University of Leeds. The author is a man called Ronald A. Geeves. It's a Doctor of Philosophy, and it's called Sectarian Influences Within Islam in Britain, and with special reference to community. And one of the communities he's talking about, and this was, as I said, it was in August 1994, is the Tablighi Jamaat movement. Anyway, he states, it's around about page 200. The problem of Deobandi isolationism is the title. Previous chapters have explored the history and development of Deoband in the context of British conquest of India and the decline of Muslim power. The Deobandis responded to the social and political changes brought about by colonialism by creating a self-conscious ideology and constructing a fence around themselves in which the primary focus was group loyalty. This loyalty was expressed as loyalty to the pristine faith of Islam. So, but in effect, he's saying, and he gives 4 reasons why this happens, but we don't have time to discuss that now. I'll discuss it at a later date. What he's saying is Deobandis are, and I've used the word before, cult-like, intrinsic, inner-looking, group-based, self-absorbed, self-important types of people. That's what they are. And the speaker that I started with, he actually makes a point in his lecture when he's talking about Ashraf Ali Thanvi. He goes, we've failed to translate him, and we failed to export his thinking and his ideology because we didn't work hard enough in order to spread his thought. But that is not actually confirmed by the research. Here, if we look under one of the lists of the 77 and 58 Khulafa of Ashraf Ali Thanvi, we find here at the end one student, and his name is Hakim Muhammad Mustafa of Bijnor. It says he was a student of Thanvi from Kanpur. He played a major role in transmitting Thanvi's teachings. He was Thanvi's first disciple to write down the master's words. He wrote Thanvi's Urdu sermons in Arabic and later translated them to Urdu. So it's not the case. This is from the research. It's not the case that his works weren't available in Arabic. There's the proof that it was available in Arabic. I can confirm it's available in every single Tablighi mosque in the United Kingdom and in America, and I can confirm that it's available on Amazon in English. It's not that we failed to translate his works and spread his thought. His thought is moribund, and it's talking about things like the leader wanting to commit suicide, and thoughts of high-born and low-born people, basically straight racism. This is why Ashraf Ali Thanvi's thought is moribund, dying, and is not something for progressive Islam. It's suitable for pre-industrial India with all that entails. Stay tuned for many parts.